Commonly known as the grandfather of medical cannabis, Dr. Lester Grinspoon is an Emeritis Professor of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. His 1971 book, Marijuana Reconsidered, was reviewed on the front page of the New York Times Book Review and was seminal in shifting our national debate in favor of legalizing cannabis. He has been heavily involved in the research and advocacy for cannabis legalization for 50 years, and to this day, at age 90, continues to advocate for people's right to access cannabis, both for medicinal and for adult use.
I'd love to hear the story about how this all started.
Well, it was Carl Sagan and I were the closest of friends, and it was right up until the day of his death. We were each other's closest friend, but very shortly after I met him, we were invited to his apartment, and he lit up a marijuana cigarette.
A marijuana cigarette.
Here I was, a psychiatrist whose interest was in psychopharmacology, and I was a kind of, I wasn't an expert, but I was supposed to know about those things. And I said to him, "Carl, you mustn't do that." "Why not?" He said to me, and I said, "Because it will harm your health." And he took another puff, and he said, "Here, Lester, have one. I can assure you it won't harm your health." And I had the greatest respect for Carl, and I thought, I had to take that seriously. I think he's wrong, but I've got to give him the data to prove it. He's got to see the data.
Yeah.
He has to see the data. So I went to the Conway Library, and I was going to read some things on cannabis, but I became so involved. I found it so interesting. I don't believe there's a publication in Conway Library that touches on cannabis that I didn't read at that time.
Would that be the first systematic literature review on cannabis? Literature?
Well, it may be. I can't make that claim,
right.
But it was the first systematic review for me.
Yeah.
And that's how I became interested in this, and I could be reassured that my friend Carl wasn't harming himself. In fact, when he said, "Here, have a puff, you'll love it," I didn't make much of it, but a lot of people don't. Many people who smoke for the first time even have more than one puff. It didn't mean anything to me. But maybe it was a big placebo that worked for people, and that's great. That's going to hurt them. That's not going to hurt them.
That's a good question, actually.
Yeah, really.
That's a good research question. And you studied so long, then after that, wrote a book, Marijuana Reconsidered, and are really a true trailblazer in the field of cannabis research, so we all have to thank you for that.
Thank you.
But they refused your professorship at Harvard.
They did, even after my second book on that came out. I've written, I can't quite remember, I think it's, 7 or 8 books, Betsy, something like that.
Wow.
Things are changing. But at any rate, Harvard didn't like that either.
Yeah. What did they, it was just a real struggle. Could you
Well,
find
I
funding?
think it ultimately compromised my full professorship.
Yeah.
I was never promoted to full professor.
Yeah.
I mean, I know exactly how it happened and who won the faculty. Really persuaded the promotions committee that they shouldn't promote me for that reason.
There's many in the community now that are trying to advocate at Harvard to get your professorship, and few Dan Adams at the Boston Globe and Dick Evans are working hard.
They make the point that I really don't care.
Yeah.
There was a time, but boy, that hurt. I didn't get a professorship.
Yeah.
And my poor mother would have been The poor thing had to die knowing I never got the professorship, but she could probably believe.
Well, you've led, in lieu of professorship, you've changed much for cannabis science and the area around it, and for advocacy, and having real understanding now of the medical value of cannabis.
And I think the most important contribution, I hope you do not think that's too immodest of me, is that I helped make it possible, because clearly I'm not crazy, I've accomplished something and so forth and so on, and I use cannabis, and I think it's useful. And in some of the writing I go into the ways in which I think it may be useful to people. It's so different. I mean, it's okay. It would be okay with me if humans were never interested in altering, as I say, their sense of consciousness. But to the extent that they are, and I certainly am, to the extent that they are, it's great to have a way that they can do it that's safe and very interesting.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, I mean, after Carl Sagan gave you the marijuana cigarette, you then stopped drinking.
I stopped drinking as soon as I have wine at dinner, but I used to come home from work and I'd have more than one jiggers of whatever, and soda. I don't do that at all. I'm not interested in it. There isn't. Well, I guess there's some gin in there, but still. But it's been a lot of years. But
your work advocating that it is a safer alternative has been extremely important, and I think you're absolutely correct that you did unlock this for other researchers and for the general public, and have played a tremendous role in breaking down the stigma around cannabis. And I think, now, what do you think, now it's legal in Massachusetts?
Well, I've got to add to what you said. I think it's not just that the stigma has taken a nosedive, but that people are coming to understand that it's useful. There are a number of ways in which it's useful to I should say, useful to me. I have reason to believe, from what I've read and discussed with other people, useful to other people as well. So that it's not just that it's fun. It's a nice experience, but it can be useful.
And we're finding out there's now many more researchers that are coming online now, in this new, at least even in the last 5 years, and there's a lot of science, obviously, in Israel and other places, finding all the medicinal value now. And through your leadership, you've built the foundation of science that we can now work off of. So.
No, thank you.
Well, thank you for your leadership. It's legal now here in Massachusetts, and there's a research license category now in the adult use framework. If you had any advice for a future researcher in cannabis, what would you give them, or what do you think we should study of these useful benefits?
Well, I think there are probably more medical uses for it than there are a lot of medical uses, but I think there are even more.
Really?
And they, and medicine, organized medicine, has to give its stamp of approval for this to be something that should be seriously looked into. As it is, it's you have to be peripheral people who are interested in it, and it really should be. Enough is known now to really take this seriously and see what part it should be playing in health. In health, not just medicine, but in health. Excuse me.
And do you think the federal government should take a leadership on that, or do you think it's more of the responsibility of the clinical populations?
Well, the federal government ultimately has to do it because things like licenses and so. I think when people come to pressure the federal government to say, hey, come on, let's take a look at this, you know, it's been maligned for so many years. Is it possible it's really useful to us as a matter of health? Now that you got to have the federal government.
And it's fundamental. It's interesting that you say health, not even just disease state.
No, I mean health. Yeah.
That's a very
That's why I
interesting
said I'm not.
distinction.
Certainly, there are certain diseases where you'd have to be a real dummy not to see how useful it is there. But I'm talking about health in general.
Well, thank you for your leadership, and it's a very honor to meet you, and it's an honor to be here. And we'll work to try and take research and continue forward. Just really appreciate the time.
Well, I'll shake on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.